Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Well, Betty, first I want you to know, your husband and I have two things in common. First, I knew him when he was here at Metro West Medical, and we both went to the same barber for years. Get along. All right, and where's Esma? I saw Esma floating around. Where is Esma?
I guess he's
No, where is she? Oh, she's not here. All right. Well, first, despite the sadness of the event today, we come to celebrate the gift of a wonderful life. And
Excuse me, Father,
yep.
is the microphone on? I don't know. If it's
Hello,
on.
Tom, can you raise that up just a
Are you
smidge?
hearing? Okay.
All right, huh? Is that a little bit better? The technology is good when it works.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. All right, this is good. All right. Well, first, Betty, David, Peter, Stephanie, Dorio, grandchildren, Levi, Nina, and Maxine. Where are you three? Now, who is the smartest of you? All right. Now, actually, what grade are you in?
Sophomore in high school. Freshman in college.
Well, where do you go to school?
Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, good for you.
I'm a senior at college,
And what?
George Washington University.
Oh, what are you majoring in?
Political science and environmental studies.
Well, you'll never be without work. All right, this is good. Well, if I asked you, the oldest president you remember as a little kid growing up, not George Washington, the oldest one you actually can remember, who would that be?
For me, it was Obama.
Obama?
Yeah.
Obama?
I mean, that was 2008, so.
Oh, okay, all right. Your grandpa goes back 1935. Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush #1, Clinton, Bush #2, Obama, all the way up the line. For the grandchildren, all of the people you studied in history, Ford, Edison, Bell, Marconi, the Wright brothers, were all part of your grandpa's lived experience. And I know I have a couple doctors here today, but just if memory serves me, in the 1930s, the anesthetic of choice would have been ether, I believe, for operations. And at that time, as you got older, the higher your blood pressure, the better it was. So, you know, a few things have changed over the years. Well, of the kids growing up, who gave your dad the hardest time? David, do you have a few words to say about that? Oh, he's not here. All right. Today, despite the sadness of the event, we come to celebrate the gift of a wonderful life. And you know, Bob touched so many people in the course of his life. And really, that's a cause of great celebration. Tom Brokaw wrote a beautiful book a few years back, The Greatest Generation. And in many ways, you know, Bob symbolizes that group. So today, our readings and our prayers remind us of the journey. I think Betty and the kids were probably broadcasted to 1 million people today who were watching. And when you think of all of the people your husband, your dad touched in the course of his life, you know, what a tribute. So today we say really thank you to a job well done. And really the theme today are seasons of our lives. And in many ways, each of you have experienced one or more seasons of Bob's life. So we come together first in prayer, compassionate and loving God. Yours is the beauty of childhood, and yours is the fullness of years. Comfort us in our sorrow. Strengthen us with hope, and breathe peace into our troubled hearts. Assure us that the love we had for Bob was not in vain. Indeed, make it a part of the story of goodness you're even now pointed upon him in your eternal kingdom. Guide us this time of sadness with the light of your love and the strength of your compassion. Give all of us the strength and courage to face each new day. We ask this through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Our scripture reading this afternoon is reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. You recognize it the moment I start. Most people think this was written by Pete Seeger in the 60s for the old movie Alice's Restaurant, those of you old enough. It was made into a popular song, Turn, Turn, Turn. And so often when scripture is adapted to popular music, they leave the last line out. They leave it out because it tends not to be a rhyming line. But in scripture, last lines are often the moral of the story. So here today, the author reminds us of the seasons of our lives. He gives us the reason at the end. There's a time for everything under heaven. There's an appointed time for everything, and a time for every affair under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot the plant. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to be far from embraces. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. God has made everything appropriate to its time and has put the timeless into their hearts without us ever discovering from beginning to end the work which God has done. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Ecclesiastes talks about seasons of our lives. And in many ways, each of you have experienced one or more seasons of Bob's life. As a son, brother, father, grandfather, all of you come here today having known him in a unique and special way. And I think first and foremost today, when someone we love and care about dies, I don't think it matters the age, I don't think it matters the circumstance. First and foremost, it brings out all of the different emotions within us. And emotions are very mixed and varied at depth. We live in such a high-tech world today. Most of my ministry was spent in the city of Boston. 9 years at Boston Medical Center. Just finished 18 years with hospice. We think if there's something wrong, we check ourselves in the hospital, they fix us, we come out the front door, good as new. Boston reminds us life is quite that simple. And despite all the technology, all of the things we have in our world today, we still don't have the power of life and death. And oftentimes we get angry, because we live in a world where we want control over everything. And so often, despite being here in one of the medical centers of the universe, these last 3 years, we've learned that a microscopic virus can debilitate our entire world. When we get angry. Sometimes we feel relief that a person's journey is at an end, and they finally at peace. And so often in hospice, the first question I get asked from families, when will my loved one die? And it's the only question I can ever answer that I've yet to figure out. I've had services this year for a patient at 5 months old who was at 103. People die when they die. But Bob's death reminds us how temporary and how fragile human life is. And the part that's not in the song is the moral of the story. After Ecclesiastes reminds us of the seasons of our lives, the last line says very simply, God makes everything appropriate to its time. And Bob's death reminds us really that all of us are here temporarily, all of us are here on loan. So today we bring up all of the different emotions. Secondly, we remember. And the memories will be different for each and every one of you because he related to you in a unique and special way. And Phil, why don't you start us off and share a few words about Bob?
Phil Jantz, Betty's son and Bob's son-in-law. I was told I'm doing this about 2 hours ago, so bear with me. I am definitely not a good speaker. It suffices to say Bob was a great and intelligent man, professionally, Yale, Boston College, Korean War veteran. All his positions at Larry Morse that he held and did extremely well. These are accomplishments that many never get to achieve, and I'm told that Bob did this with ease. Never did he show ego or superiority. He was a true leader. He maintained his love of reading and learning through his whole life. He had an iPad and headphones that, he had the best headphones in the world, thank God. My mother, brother, and our children knew Bob in a much more personal way than just his academic, professional achievements. To my mother, he was a caring, thoughtful, and attentive husband. They shared a love for travel, fine food, wine, symphony, reading, and baseball. Bob, an avid baseball fan for the Yankees, Betty for the Red Sox. It was comical. It actually resulted in televisions in 2 different rooms in the house so that they could cheer on their own teams. The amount of stories from just that situation would be incredible. I was careful never to talk about baseball while visiting. Bob and Betty had a companionship, a partnership, love. They were good for each other, and I knew my mother was in good hands. In the early years of Bob and Betty, my brother David and I lived several miles away and visited frequently. I always looked forward to seeing Bob, the good conversation, the great meals, and the joking around. His sense of humor was biblical. My children, my brother's children, loved heading over to visit, as Bob would sneak them candy and play with them in the yard often. I'm sure they won't ever forget that. As years went by, our families dispersed throughout the country, and our visits were less frequent, but no less special. Bob remained as a great friend and family member, and important to all of us in our family. One of my favorite memories of Bob happened about a year ago. He was sitting in a chair in the kitchen with his headphones and his iPad. I think he was pretending to do something, but as a conversation I was having with my mother went on, I said something totally absurd, just off the wall. I can't even remember what it was. I looked over, Bob winked at me and started chuckling. His hearing had been restored. These are just a few of the stories and feelings of what Bob meant to my family and I. My attempt to actually define or eulogize Bob could not begin to bring him justice or translate to what he meant to so many people. Smart, witty, understanding, personable, caring, tactful, and many other words. This was Bob. He will be missed.
Phil, thank you so much. And you know, you have to give Bob a lot of credit to be a Yankees fan here in this area. And I just realized that that's the Yankees. I wasn't sure what that was when I came in. You lived right on the cutting edge. Dr. Frager, why don't you share a few thoughts?
There was a time in my life when I didn't need any aids or things to do. Now I have dunks. So I wanted to tell you that I'm truly honored to be able to participate in the celebration of Bob's life. The details of his life are just magnificently drawn out in his obituary. Bob had several skills, several accomplishments, several desires, and worked hard to accomplish them all. Bob and I were travelers down the same road for a very long period of time. Mind you, I did not meet Bob until 1972. We both went to medical school in Boston. We both trained at the Boston City Hospital on their surgical services, achieved our board certification in surgery, and we both fulfilled our military obligation, for Bob in Korea, for me in Vietnam. And as I said, we didn't meet physically until 1972. In 1972, I came to the Leavenworth Hospital. I had several friends who were practicing there, and by that time, Bob and Tony Capabianco had formed a professional corporation called Native Surgical Associates, Inc. Had been working together for a year. I cross-covered with somebody else, but got very close to them, and just about a year later, I became the third member of Native Surgical Associates, Inc. We then went on a 42-year run of having great success, enjoying each other, and really impacting healthcare in the surgical world. Going to give you two little views into what life was like. And you have to understand, you have to take them from where they're coming. Late in our career, I decided to take up golf, despite my knee and what caused my knee and certain other things. I was atrociously bad and knew it. I had no idea until I read that obituary that Bob was so well endowed in all the sports and what have you. So I started on a campaign of pestering him, trying to play golf with me. And I was Bob and I almost never disagreed or said no to anything the other guy wanted. But he kept making excuses not to play, and dumb me, the light never went on. So one day we decided we're going to play together. We get out on the golf course, we get to the third hole, which is a par 5, long hole, and Bob hits a ball that goes so high and so far that I never saw it come down, and I'm convinced it's still orbiting in space. And I also had a light turn on, and I said, that's enough. So as he came back from the tee box, I put my arm around him and said, you know what, Bob? Drinks and food are on me. And we spent the rest of the day in the clubhouse. The second one is a little more complicated, and I know the physicians will understand it, and I'm going to tell you to avoid most of what I say about medical things, but the punchline I think you will enjoy. In the 1980s, at the height of our career, we were being bombarded by things that were very difficult for people in the practice of medicine. We had the advent of malpractice insurance rises. We had state and federal government trying to fix and keep our prices. It was just a nightmare, and probably the worst thing of it all was that our offices were just overrun because all of life was about documenting and being sure that the codes were correct and that every I was dotted and so on and so forth. I used to call it checkerboard squares because there were a million people that were working, checking us, and then there were people checking on them. At any rate, in 1980, the Harvard School of Public Health published a book called let me see if I can remember, The Social Transformation of American Healthcare. I don't know how many people read it, but I was one. And what this book did was usher in the advent of health maintenance organizations called HMOs, and you've all seen them advertised on TV. At that time, the concept was, and there was an incredible amount of seed money, and a lot of people that knew nothing about healthcare or medicine were trying to create these. In our small world, we had 3 of them make presentations at our rounds. I was negative, but I was not nasty. I did not like the concept, and I thought the concept, if you discount your fees to me, I will give you all of my work. And the attack was going to be that they were going to companies that insured their employees and insured them as a group. And I said, you know what? I don't think that will ever work, which is what my stance was. Anyway, after the third failure, I went back to my office, about to see a bunch of patients, and Bob walked in, very quietly, sat down, we chit-chatted about much to do about nothing for a while. And then Bob turned to me and said, "Steve, I'd love to operate." Period. With that, I immediately understood what was happening. I may have had my view, but Bob and a lot of other people had their views, and I had no authority. I was not the medical staff president, I was just me. And so I named him the master of understatement because the statement said it all. There was no argument, I didn't get angry, we never had a row about it, and we never said no. We just understood that that was the way of life. And that was a technique I saw him use several times on me and several other people. Excellent, just an excellent technique. At any rate, I would like to conclude by saying that for all our years together, and I'm talking about 42 of practice and probably 20 beyond that, we enjoyed each other as company. We enjoyed real success. We had fellowship, we had friendship, and we had a really dynamic, wonderful life practicing in medicine. Bob was always available to me. He was always witty, he was always charming, and he was quite capable of giving you in Yiddish we call it a zetz, a push, by an understatement. And I will really miss Bob, and I hope and pray that he rests in peace.
Doctor, thank you so much. And, you know, I know I extend really the appreciation of the Native community, the area here. You know, your practice impacted the lives of so many people over the years. Dr. Capriapo, yourself, Dr. Kim. And, you know, we thank you for that. And I do share your frustration with the coding system. I put the wrong number in, it gets paid for. If I don't put the wrong number in, it is a maze. And I really don't think anyone understands the system anyway. But the new doctor's coming up. This is the normal. Brian Wee.
Thank you, Father Nick. Thank you all for coming. I'm Brian. I am Bob's son-in-law by way of marrying his daughter, Doria. Reflecting upon Bob's life, it's hard to deny the many things that he and I had in common. And I think this really contributed to the relationship that he and I had over the years. Number one, Bob and I were both Jersey boys. Robert Misoo Kim, born in 1935 in Paterson, New Jersey. I'm not so sure many of you know this, but our middle daughter, Nina, is his namesake. Her name is Nina Misoo. Misoo in Korean means beautiful face, which I think she is. Now, Paterson, New Jersey is about 30 minutes outside of where I grew up in Parsippany, New Jersey. Paterson is it's a working class town in Jersey. It's a city just like I think Worcester and a lot of Massachusetts towns. It's also the town where my late mother worked for nearly 30 years. So I used to go to Paterson quite a bit as a young boy. I'm not so sure there's any other state in New Jersey in the country that has made fun of more than New Jersey. And if you're born from Jersey, and if you're from Jersey, you know that there's a certain grit, there's a certain resilience to New Jerseyans. It's a part of being Jersey strong. It's the kind of stuff that Bruce Springsteen wrote about. It's just a certain resilience that New Jerseyans have. The second thing is that Bob and I are both first-generation Asian Americans. So, despite being born generations apart, I'm quite certain our childhoods were pretty similar. It was very typical for Asian immigrant parents to shield their children from their Asian heritage and culture. It was really because think they just wanted their kids to be completely accepted into American culture. And I'm pretty sure that Bob's existence and his growing up is very similar to that. And you know, we looked different, but we sounded the same. We acted like everybody else. We were, you know, through and through American, but we just had a slightly different experience. And it was, I think that shaped the characters that both he and I were. And I think we recognized that in each other when we first met. And I think it was just, you know, it was just one of those unspoken acknowledgments that we always had with one another. Number 3, as we've all talked about and heard quite a bit from Phil, Bob was a diehard, lifelong New York Yankees fan. Bob grew up during one of the greatest Yankee eras, so I'm going to add to the list of people that Bob lived in his culture and his generation. Joe DiMaggio, Phil Rizzuto, Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Billy Martin, Mickey Mantle. In Bob's first 20 years of his life, the Yankees won the World Series a staggering 12 times. 12 out of the 20 in his first 20 years. 4 straight years in 1936, 37, 38, 39. A little break, 41, 43, 47, and then 5 straight years in a row from 1949 to 1953. I'm sorry, Betty. But you knew I had to say it. Betty and I have shared this New York Yankees-Red Sox rivalry for quite some time, although I used to sit in the other room with Bob. I grew up with the New York Yankees in the 1970s. Thurman Munson, Willie Randolph, Bucky Dent, Craig Nettles, Mickey Rivers, Reggie, Louisiana Lightning, Ron Guidry. Billy Martin was the fiery manager. Yogi Berra was a coach. And holy cow, Phil Rizzuto announced the games. So it was coming full circle. It's no wonder that we both grew up Yankee fans and loving winners. Number 4, Bob and I are both Ivy Leaguers. Bob graduated from Yale. I went to an Ivy League that wasn't Yale. Bob was very proud of his Yale heritage, and rightly so. But the thing that we had most in common was an absolute adoration and everlasting love for the Kim children. You know, Stephanie, Dory, and I, we were immensely close. You know, we rely on each other for, you know, just about everything in so many ways. And Bob cared deeply about the well-being of his children. You know, I'm sure it was hard for his kids to see this, as it is for all kids. As an outsider looking in, it was pretty plainly obvious to me how much effort and planning he did to look after them, both in his life and after his life, and his grandkids as well. It was just immensely generous. Meeting Bob for the first time was pretty intimidating. For starters, I had heard so much about him. He had these mottos. I mean, oh my God, these mottos. I would hear about them all the time. Blood is thicker than water. Take what you want, eat what you take. I would hear Doria and Stephanie repeat these mottos again and again and again. I heard the stories of the father that he was, of the man that he was, the mystery rides, his love of Joshua Chamberlain, the cunning professor with no military experience, who used his intellect to defeat his enemy against all odds in a momentous Civil War battle. It was easy to see why he idolized Chamberlain. It was a man who used his intellect to outsmart and outwit. Bob had a great love for art and culture. His love for classical music had a huge influence on his kids. Deep appreciation for Frank Lloyd Wright and functional design. I bet many of you don't know this. He taught Dorio how to chug beers. She certainly can do it better than me. There was an aura about Bob, and I will assure you he lived up to the legend. He was cool with a little bit of slick. He had an easy nonchalance with a hint of arrogance. When I met him for the first time, it was hard not to get the feeling that he was just sizing me up just a little bit. It's hard to describe, but there was just this look in his eye that just, you know, like any good father, you know that he wanted to make sure I was good enough for his Dorio. And of course, I wanted to, impress my future father-in-law, so, I did my best. But truthfully, it was a little bit more than that. He just had this way about him. He was really cool, and he was friendly, and he was funny, and, it wasn't just about wanting to impress, it was actually about wanting him to genuinely like you. Every time Bob bounced back from one of his health ailments, you just had to admire his amazing resilience. There it was that Jersey strong, it was that ability to come back. His mental acuity never really abandoned him. He remained sharp, witty, and connected all the way to the end. Over the last couple of years, as he became a little bit more resigned to his health, his hearing and verbal capabilities definitely waned. And of course, as Phil was also talking about, we missed those rich conversations, and I think we all did. We all missed that side of him. He loved to converse, he loved to question, he loved to challenge. I noticed at that time he started to communicate a little bit more with his eyes, a lot more. A little hard to see him sometimes, but it was, he definitely just had this look in his eyes. He'd beam with pride over the grandkids. He'd give a look of sorrow over his aging body. You'd get more than an occasional eye roll. But during those last few years, we exchanged a lot of glances without words. There was just a look of appreciation of how Betty, how you took great care of him. There was an amusement in his eyes as he listened to our girls talk about K-pop and teenage life. There was pride in his eyes for the accomplishments of his kids and his grandkids. There was just a joy in seeing them. There was a concern in his eyes as he listened to narratives of job trials and tribulations and moving apartments and just the challenges of life. There was a look of acknowledgement to say, I'm glad that you're in the lives of my girls. An ask in his eye to say, please look after them, be good to them. Just a gratitude and appreciation. I can see him right now. I could see this knowing look, a little wry smile, a quick wink, and a see you, kid. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Brian. And you brought back some memories too, because I remember all those old Yankee fans and players. And I will tell you one funny story. Years ago, I had a patient, and you get the intake of the demographics and family history. And he was a plumber by profession. But looking back, he pitched for 4 years for the Yankees with Whitey Ford. And as I did a little research, he was pretty damn good. So I asked him, I said, why did you leave the Yankees? I said, you were a great left-hander. He said, after my wife had the third child, I couldn't afford to pitch anymore. He became a plumber. You forget those things. Grandchildren have a very special window in the life of their grandparents. And why don't you three ladies, I'm going to share a reading, but I'd also like you to tell us one thing about your grandpa. All right, so come on up.
I think I can manage my height. On joy and sorrow. Then a woman said, speak to us of joy and sorrow. And he answered, your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was often filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. It is not the cup that holds your wine, the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven. And it is not the lute that soothes your spirit, the very wood that was hollowed with knives. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart and you shall see that the truth you are weeping for it has been your delight. Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, no, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and which one sits alone with you on your board? Remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspicious suspended that scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty, you are standstill and balance. When the treasure-keeping lifts you to weigh his gold and silver, need must your sorrow, or your sorrow rise or fall.
Okay, was not completely prepared to speak, but I do have a list of some funny text messages that he would send me, because he loved to wish me random national holidays. So, some of the national holidays he felt were very important that I know are Happy Hamburger Day, Grandparents' Day, Happy Earth Day. He wished me Happy New Year on January 22nd, so that was nice. National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, National Grilled Cheese Day, National Beer Day, which he wished me before I turned 21, National Pie Day, National Cold Cuts Day, National Pancake Day, National Muffin Day, Pizza Day, Peanut Butter Day, Hot Sauce Day, and then the last national holiday he wished me was the National Bagels Day. And even though these texts were so random and silly, they were filled with so much love, and he was a very thoughtful and caring person, and even just these text messages really show that, and so we will miss him a lot.
Hi again. So I think one thing that I feel like we should all remember deeply is that although his health sometimes faltered, his memory and his wit was always there, so was his humor. So I don't know how, but he would remember the smallest details about me, and one of them was being that my favorite restaurant is Roach Brothers, the supermarket, for their delicious mac and cheese. So when I was at camp for 3 weeks, I sent him a letter saying, "This food is horrible and there's only rotten apples." And I said, "Please send help, they're not feeding me." He in return sent me a letter that just said, "Here you go," and it was a Roach Brothers coupon for their hot meals. Although it was expired and I could not use it, I held it up against my bed, I taped it, and people would ask me, "What are Roach Brothers?" Because half of them were coming internationally, and I would explain Roach Brothers was my favorite restaurant from Massachusetts. But that letter meant a lot just because he remembered such a small detail about my life that I only mentioned maybe once or twice, if we were going or not, but he always never failed to remember those small details about me.
Okay, hi, I'm Nina. I wasn't prepared to speak, so I'm sorry if my thoughts are really disorganized. But I was always the shyest of the three, and I had a hard time talking to him a lot, especially in his later years, because he became more quiet. And I remember one of the last times we saw him, I had something to sign that he needed to sign, and I felt really bad about it, and I didn't know how to approach him and ask him. And later, before we left, I still hadn't asked him, and he looked over at me and pointed at me, and I gave it to him, and he signed it, and we left. And I told my aunt and my father that I felt really exploited in a way, because I didn't know how to talk to him, and then he just signed something, and then we left. And then later on, my dad told me that he said that Papa, because we called him Papa, said that I was very patient, and he said I was patient, and he admired that about me, even though we didn't really talk that much. And I guess it made me realize that even though we couldn't joke the way I joke, he would joke with Maxine, that he recognized that in me, and we had an unspoken bond.
Ladies, thank you so much. And I have to say, Brian, I think Misoo is appropriate for all three. But the three of you, I used to be a school teacher and a school principal. I'm going to give you three a homework assignment. Tonight, well, you may not be able to do tonight, but either tonight, tomorrow night, I want you to take your folks, everyone outside, and look up in the sky. There'll be one one brand new bright star. That'll be the brightest star you see in the sky. That's going to be your papa. He will be your guardian, your spirit, your guiding light for the rest of your lives. It's going to look a little like a stethoscope. You cannot miss it. Every time your folks drive you crazy, every time you have trouble in school, you look up, what should I do? It'll always be your inspiration and advice. And most importantly, every time you go out on a date, he'll be in the back seat. There's a beautiful passage out of the book of Sirach that says, though our ancestors' bodies lie peacefully away, their virtues, their legacy, their heritage live on and on. They live on with their families, they live on with their friends and community. And so it will be with Bob. Doria? And for those of you that are old enough, as Paul Harvey used to say, now we're going to hear the rest of the story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dorio. I'm the youngest of Bob's children. I just want to thank you all for being here today to help celebrate his life. And I'd like to share with you a few stories that exemplify who he was as our father, as well as some moments that are special to his children. My father had a competitive spirit that was particularly noticeable at Halloween. You see, Halloween was a very favorite holiday in our house. It wasn't so much about the decorations or costumes. It was all about how many houses we could hit in trick-or-treating. It began as a safety precaution. When we moved to Glen Street, we lived in the woods, so Dad would drive us to the nearest neighborhood so we wouldn't have to walk at night. He would put down the tailgate on the family Jeep, we'd hop into the well, and then he'd drop us off at the top of the block. We would then zigzag our way down the street, collecting from each house along the way. Dad, with one hand out the window smoking a Winston Red, and the other hand slumped over the steering wheel, never broke. He never put the brake on the car. So sometimes we would have to literally run and leap into the car because he wouldn't stop for us. That first night, Dad was so impressed about how many houses we hit by driving. The next year, he wanted more. Then it became, how many towns can we hit in one night? Subcategory, which neighborhoods have the best candy? We would have so much candy that we'd bring garbage bags in the car to leave our overstuffed plastic trick-or-treat pumpkins. Word spread amongst our friends. They wanted in. Okay, but it comes with a price. You must pay the Pied Piper. At the end of the night, we'd spread out our loot onto the kitchen table. Candy was divided into groups, negotiations and tradings began. And then, like a Korean Vito Corleone, my father entered the room. He would slowly circle around the kitchen table, his eyes scanning for the coveted full-size Snicker bar, or perhaps another favorite, root beer barrels. He would pluck them from your pile, give you a nod, and simply say, tax. But we didn't mind. We had enough candy to last us until Christmas. But Dad had self-control. He would stack his confectionery payments onto the desk in his home office, as if to tease us. When we finally came to the lower shelf of our candy, he'd mock us, bringing out that full-size Snicker bar, saying, I still have my candy. Where's yours? I believe my siblings and I were the first to create the concept of Where's Waldo, but our game was called Where's Bob, and it involved my father's high school yearbook. He was the only Asian student in his class at Montclair Kimberly Academy, and he participated in every club and sport you can imagine. Class president, student council, editor-in-chief of the yearbook, school newspaper, debate team, glee club, drama club, alumni bulletin, honors course, track, cross country, baseball, and he was captain of the basketball team. He was even a member of the Black and Red Society, a select groups of students who were, surprise, heavily involved in extracurricular activities. He was voted as the student who had done most for Montclair Academy, was most likely to succeed, and most popular. He had the best school student spirit, was best all-around student, best all-around athlete, class mathematician, and most liked by faculty. We would flip through each page, searching for my dad's beaming face in the black and white photographs, giggling and pointing when we found Bob. The lone Korean face in the crowd. My dad got a kick out of our game, partly I think because he was proud of his hard work and accomplishments, and partly because he loved that we were proud of him too. My dad was one of the smartest people I knew. I would ask him to help me with my math homework, hoping he would just do it for me, but instead he would explain it to me for hours. He could speak about art, classical music, history, medicine, literature, poetry, philosophy, and sports. I loved introducing my friends to my dad because he easily found a conversation with them. He had a sense of humor, although sometimes his sense of humor was borderline childish. Embarrassing to a teen child, but hilarious to our friends. He stitched up, removed splinters and warts, and pierced ears for all the neighborhood kids. He told stories with sound effects, and he had an incredible appetite, even though his weight stayed the same since his college days. His favorite mantras were, "Take what you want, but eat what you take," and "More roast beef than keeper." I don't even know what that means. He was proud of the Kim heritage. He came from a family that was ahead of their time, pushing forward despite racism and obstacles. He was the first Asian to graduate from his high school, and one of the only 3 Asians in his graduating class at Yale. His sister, my Aunt Marion, attended Juilliard for piano, a tremendous feat in today's world, even more impressive as an Asian woman back in her day. My grandmother escaped war-torn Korea and traveled to America alone as a teenager, using fake passports to complete her journey. When she settled in New Jersey, she would often help other Koreans coming into the US. My father mentioned that some nights a stranger would be sitting at their dining room table. His father was one of the first 2 Koreans to graduate from Boston University Medical School, receiving full scholarship to obtain his BS and MD in 6 years. My father was always proud of the fact that he graduated from medical school the same year my grandfather retired from medicine. I promised my father that I would continue this legacy with his granddaughters, that they would be educated and would explore the world and chase their dreams despite whatever obstacles they encountered. And they, like my father, would do so with perseverance and perhaps some of that childish humor. Thank you.
Doria, thank you so much, and you kind of prompted my memory. I remember I was at BU when they started that 6-year med program, which was revolutionary at the time. It attracted some of the best and the brightest in the world there. Family, friends, and faith. And what the phrase that keeps coming to mind as all of you are speaking today, especially Doria, Renaissance man. Because in many ways, Bob touched so many lives, so many areas. And for the grandchildren, what a great role model for you as you grow up as well, to mirror some of the things your grandpa did. Well, I know I had to come up with something New York today, because I know a few New Yorkers here. I probably should add, since we're broadcasting, who are the New Yorkers here today? No, it's all right to raise your hand. We actually have to sign here today for you guys. A colleague of mine, Father Henry Nouwen. Henry was a prolific writer. And Henry wrote dozens of books on spiritual life and spirituality. And Henry had taken a job at Fordham in the Bronx. So he invited me up, teaching for you at the time, he invited me up and he said, "I want to take you upstate for lunch." So I put my bag in the trunk, figuring I'm going to see Niagara Falls, Lake Placid, West Point. The minute you leave the Bronx, that's upstate. Apparently, the only important part of New York State is New York City. Everything is upstate. Henry had contracted a terminal illness, and the last book that he wrote was called The Last Sabbatical, The Final Journey. And he chronicled the last year of his life. And Henry had a great love of the circus. And part of his book, he equated family life and circus life. And Betty, I suspect you were the ringmaster of the circus on more than one occasion. But this is from Henry's book, really reminds me of your dad. It's called The Trapeze Flyer. One day I was seeing Rodley, the leader of the troop, in his caravan, talking about flying. He said, as a flyer, I must have complete faith in my catcher. The public might think that I'm the greatest star of the trapeze, but the real star is Joe, my catcher. He has to be there for me with split-second precision and grab me out of the air as I come to him in the long jump. How does it work? I asked. The secret, Rodley said, is that the flyer does nothing and the catcher does everything. When I fly to Joe, I have simply to stretch out my hands and arms and wait for him to catch me, then pull me safely over the apron behind the catch bar. You do nothing? I said, surprised. Nothing, Rodley repeated. A flyer must fly and a catcher must catch. And the flyer must trust, with outstretched arms, that his catcher will be there for him. When Rodley said this with so much conviction, the words of Jesus flashed through my mind. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Dying is trusting in the catcher. To care for the dying is to say, don't be afraid. Remember that you're a beloved child of God. He will be there when you make your long jump. Don't try to grab him. He will grab you. Just stretch out your arms and hands and trust. And you know, in a very real way, Bob was a catcher for a lot of people in his life. When you kids growing up, your dad caught you, you probably didn't even know you needed to be caught. And look at all the people because of his career that he caught. So many people here in this community. But on October 5th, Bob stretched out his hands and arms, and the ultimate catcher has now led him safely home. Normally, we pray the Lord's Prayer as part of the service. And I'm going to ask you at some point today, whatever your traditions and beliefs are, that just take a moment to say a prayer, the Lord's Prayer or some other prayer, in thanksgiving of Bob's life. However, this is in tribute to our Yankees fame. Our Father, who art in the Bronx, baseball be thy name. Thy will be done. Playoffs need to be won on the field as well as in the bullpen. Give us this day our bats and gloves, and forgive us our errors, as we forgive those who homer against us. Lead us not into elimination, but victory over the Red Sox, and on to the World Series yet again. In the name of the fans, Hal Steinbrenner, and in the name of the Yankees, amen. Go